Welcome, everybody, inside the coach's office. I'm your host, Dan Murphy, alongside my co-host, Brian Barnes. And Brian, another special show we got tonight. We got two special guests. And before I introduce our first guest, how you been doing, Brian? How was your holiday?
Good, man. Good. I'm excited. Excited to have the conversations we're going to have tonight with these guys. They provide a lot of insight, and it'll be a lot of fun. It was a good holiday. Other than, we watched a football game that didn't turn out. I fell for it, right? I kind of thought they were going to respond, and didn't happen. And now a couple days later, it's things have settled a little bit, and it's always a weird Sunday when the Lions don't play. For me, I feel right like when they play on a Thursday or Monday night, it's weird, but. Yeah, man, all things are good. Just now just finishing up this regular season, and, we get to talk about a lot of fun things tonight and about a fun offseason coming up.
Yeah. Well, to help us break down this Lions-Vikings game, this disappointing Lions game and really disappointing Lions season in general, we're bringing from 100.9 The MITT, the Ben Bosscher Show, the host of the Ben Bosscher Show. It is Ben Bosscher. Ben, thanks so much for joining us.
No problem, guys. How's it going? Hope everyone had a good holiday.
Good. Other than the Lions deciding to ruin another holiday for us, ruining Thanksgiving wasn't good enough. They had to come back and ruin Christmas Day for a lot of families here in the state of Michigan. Unfortunately, they fall to the Minnesota Vikings 23-10. Just an incredibly disappointing performance from the Lions. Ben, I'll start with you. Just what are your general kind of initial thoughts coming out of this game?
My first thought is I hope the NFL never does Christmas Day again, because I don't know who's benefiting from this. I don't know who wants this. Even some of the Lions players before the game had started, like Amon-Ra and his podcast, which may be time to retire that thing. Panay Sewell and some of the media sessions, all talking about we don't want to play in this game. It's like, okay, I'm with you. I don't want you to be playing on Christmas either, because I don't want to dedicate 3 hours being stressed out on a holiday. So I'm with you. Roger Goodell, please don't do that again. I know he's going to, but come on. But the fact that the players are saying it, it's like, okay, maybe this was written on the wall a little bit. My biggest takeaway from the game, I don't know, the fact that they were pathetic for 4 straight quarters. They roll right into this game the same way that they played against the Steelers. And it took them 3.5 quarters to wake up against the Steelers, and all but the same in this game. Some would argue they never woke up. Offensive line, worst performance of their year, or worst performance of the year. The running backs couldn't get anything going. Second straight week, they were under 2.5 yards per carry on the ground. And Jared Goff was under pressure the entire time. I thought that was their probably worst game of the year, and the cat was out of the bag that the Lions can't protect anybody if you just blitz every single time. And that's basically what Minnesota did by blitzing over 50% of the snaps. So yeah, holiday ruined. It was not a very fun watch, I would say, on Christmas.
Yeah, that was something that kind of rubbed me the wrong way going into this game. Was, some of the Lions' top players, Sewell and St. Brown. Sewell came out a couple of weeks ago and said it. St. Brown was more this week on his podcast, but basically saying they didn't want to play in this game. It's like, yeah, I get it. I know you don't. I understand you don't want to play on Christmas, but hey, man, you guys all got your bag, man. Especially these guys that are saying it. Mm-hmm. You guys are multimillionaires. I talked this with my wife and some of my family members at Christmas. I'm like, make a day of it. Make it special for your family. Bring your family out. You guys got the money. Bring them all out to Minnesota. Take your kids out to Mall of America and have a big shopping fest. You can make it special for your family. Don't come out and say hey, this is crap that we got to play in this game. It just, I don't know. It bothered me a little bit hearing it. And it felt like when they came out and played, yeah, you guys showed that you didn't want to be there. Brian, what was your biggest takeaway from this game?
I'm going to echo what Ben said, kind of one of our talking points, it's the third or fourth one down. I don't want to give it away, but, you said they looked kind of lifeless against the Steelers, right? And then they looked pretty lifeless. They followed that up against the Vikings. And to me, it's we talked about this when we talked to Sean Belegian, we didn't think they beat the Rams, but then it's okay, man, now it's go time, backs against the wall. We win these last 3 games. This is who we are. This is our culture. This is our grit. And instead, 2 pretty awful performances. They lost to a team on Thursday that had 3 total passing yards, and and then to your point, they mouthed off about having to play on Christmas, and then some comments with fans, interactions on Twitter and Instagram and stuff, about, hey man, I got mine or whatever. DJ Reader, I think it was, right? Just extremely disappointing, because that wasn't something we ever thought we'd see, in my opinion, regardless of the results, just like the way it played out. Like a Dan Campbell coach team, that supposedly is what he is all about, right? The culture and the grit, and that we didn't see.
Yeah, I mean, incredibly disappointing. Like you said, like I wouldn't have never expected seeing the team come out like this. When it is, granted, it was going to take a lot. It was going to take two Lions wins and 2 Green Bay losses to get in, but there still was a shot. Like it wasn't, it wasn't out of the question that they could make the playoffs, that they could find a way to win the next 2 games, and to come out and perform like that was just incredibly disappointing. And the biggest takeaway for me was the -6 turnover ratio. Like, my goodness, -6 turnovers. You just don't see that in the NFL, man, at this level. And to play a team that, like you said, man, only 3 passing yards, and to find a way to lose that game, and just incredibly disappointing. But Jared Goff, man, probably his worst game of the year. And he had performed at an all-pro level, top 5 level, I think, all season, despite everything that was going on around him, offensive line issues, even rushing issues last few games. He was still playing at a very high level, but kind of a poor performance in this one. A couple of bad throws that result in interceptions, some fumbles that, maybe weren't his fault, some high snaps and things of that nature. But just all around, not the best game for Jared Goff. And Ben, I want to get your opinion on what you think about Jared Goff and where he's at with things with the Detroit Lions now, because there's a lot of people in this fan base. I know Brian is one of them, who doesn't believe that the Lions can win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. What do you think?
Brian, I used to be with you. I really did. I was, once upon a time, as much as I don't want to admit this, once upon a time, I was a Hendon Hooker person. At least I saw the upside in it. At least, like, I understood what the Lions were trying to accomplish with that pick of, hey, we don't want to pay Jared Goff. And I think that's why the Lions took Hooker. It's like, okay, if this guy ends up working out, then we get to extend this, like, theoretical window even further. Can we win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff? I think the answer is, like, I think the answer is pretty obviously yes, based on how the last couple of seasons have gone. So, like, I don't know. I think about it like this. With everything that went so poorly with the Lions season this year, like going right down to the Frank Ragnow retirement, the horrendous offensive line, the fact that they had no run support, the fact that Jared Goff was still under like constant pressure the entire season when they went up against good defenses, the fact that their defense barely gave them any support in the second half of the season, and this team still somehow averaged 29 points a game. I mean, if I would have told you all those problems, like before the season starts, hey, these are all going to be major flaws in this team, I would have said, like, okay, this offense took an enormous step backwards. They're still the second highest scoring offense in the NFL, at least heading into today. I have to go see if they're still second, only behind the Rams. And I think the biggest reason because of that is Jared Goff. Like, there were certain games, including this one against Minnesota, where they could not move the football at all on the ground. And it set up for all these 3rd and longs, all these 3rd and, like, they were going backwards a ton in the Steelers game. They had, in the Steelers game, 7 different 3rd and 10 plus, like 3rd and 10 plus yards to go. Of those 7 opportunities they had, they were 3rd and 10 plus. 6 of them were 3rd and 11 plus. So they were just going backwards every single time they tried to run the ball. Yet Jared Goff's picking up all these 3rd and longs. We saw it on the first drive for the Lions in this game against the Steelers, or in this game against the Vikings. If we're breaking down like the cap numbers and stuff, yeah, there's a huge spike this upcoming year, $69 million in 2026, $54 million in 2027, and then back up to $61 million in 2028. And if the cap's going to go up on average 10% every single season, he's probably going to be making 22% of the cap, which is a lot this upcoming season. But I think about it like this. Okay, in theory, they're hiring a better offensive coordinator. In theory, Calvin Shepard is taking a step forward as a DC the same way a player would from year 1 to year 2. In theory, they're bringing in a couple new extra offensive linemen. In theory, the safeties are both back. I know nobody knows what's going on with Kirby Joseph's knee anymore, but those guys are both going to be back. This team should be better next season. And I have a hard time pointing to the guy playing quarterback who's been doing it at a very high level for the last 2 years, where he's been top 5 in yards, touchdowns, completion percentage. He's been doing all this stuff at a very high level. All the things around him this year were so disastrous, yet they were still able to score 29 points a game. I don't think this season is on Jared Goff. I could name 12 other reasons why the season went to hell before Jared Goff came up. I haven't always been this, but suddenly I've turned into a Jared Goff guy where I'm going to be defending him all offseason because I do not think that this was his fault. And we've shown if he has a good offensive line around him and there's a little bit better of a situation, he's able to put up these incredible numbers and go toe-to-toe with any team in the NFL.
Brian, I'll let you give the counter argument to it.
So I think Jared Goff is a fine quarterback, and I've said that, right? But historically in the NFL, especially recent, right? Fine quarterbacks don't win Super Bowls and championships, right? It's a quarterback-driven league where it's the elite dudes, and if they're not elite year to year, they're play elite, right, during the season and then in the playoffs, right? And so I go back to this with Jared Goff. I agree with you, Ben, on a couple things. Like, obviously, like being put in third and long situations is not ideal for any quarterback, right? And you're under pressure, and I don't think the play calling helped him out a little bit. Again, Dan and I feel like we talk about this every week. Like, we wish there were more screens in their offense. We wish there were a little bit more creativity to help them out a little bit, things like that. But at some point, like that's who John Morton, that's who Dan Campbell, that's who, you are who you are, right? And so, that being said, though, it's a quarterback-driven league where schemes are built around your quarterback. And every quarterback in the NFL, I think, would say, yeah, if I had protection and I had skill guys, like we would put up numbers. You know what I mean? And again, that's not to say he's not a top 10 NFL quarterback, but to me, elite quarterbacks win Super Bowls. And if not, they play at an elite level. And so looking back, the last 10 Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, obviously, it's Mahomes, Stafford, Brady, who are all Hall of Famers, and then Nick Foles, right, who obviously is not a Hall of Famer, but he had a pretty sick postseason run, right? And so to your point, Ben, like, can Jared Goff go on that type of run? Sure, I guess he can. But again, there was a reason why the Rams traded him as well, for Matthew Stafford. So, I mean,
did you used to say this about Matt Stafford, though? And I don't mean to cut you off, but I feel like we're just like running into a constant of like, oh, Jared Goff's been here, that's the reason we're failing. I feel like there's a lot of fans that said, hey, Stafford's never going to be able to win a Super Bowl, when in reality he gets traded away and is potentially going to win his second one here.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of people saying that he can't win.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it might be too simplistic, right? And there's so many layers to it. Like, maybe Tom Brady doesn't win all those Super Bowls if he's not with Bill Belichick and then Bruce Arians, right? And then Matt Stafford goes to an offensive-minded genius and Sean McVay and finally puts it together. They win a Super Bowl, right? To your point, there is a lot of layers to it. I just think, if there's a lot of quarterbacks in my mind that I'm like, all right, you're down a touchdown, you're on your 20-yard line, and you have 20 minutes, or you have 2 minutes to go tie the game. How many quarterbacks would you put ahead of Jared Goff? I guess, you know what I mean? So, but again, though, like you said, though, to your point, though, like I think this season was probably not a fair reflection of him in general. When you think about, again, all the injuries and the inconsistency in the running game and the questioning of the play calling and all that stuff. That's all problematic. And in theory, I agree with Ben that they should be better if all those guys are healthy. But like, how many of those guys take a natural step back next year, right? Is Taylor Decker 100% healthy next year? Like, there's so many layers to it. Unfortunately, like, gosh, this offseason is going to be wild. At least in our minds, I think it should be wild. I feel like we're talking about the Tigers, right? Like, they better do something, right? Like, we feel like something needs to be done.
Well, Brian, you brought up, scheme and the coaching. Like, how much does this go on Dan Campbell? Ben, I'll start with you. Like, how much does this unsuccessful season fall on the head of Dan Campbell as head coach?
I mean, anytime you have Super Bowl aspirations and your season ends before you can even get into the postseason, a lot of it's going to fall on the head coach. I think if I had to pinpoint one exact moment that this Lions season kind of snapped, and it was like that, in hindsight, like, we can look back and say this might be the moment. It's when Dan Campbell took over his play calling, but it's not for the reason you think, because they just factually became a better offense. I think the John Morton stuff became really stale, really predictable, not a lot of creativity. Not that Dan Campbell's this A-plus play caller, but I think he's capable. You know what I mean? Like some of these third and shorts, yeah, there were some questionable calls. I think Dan Campbell was the last person to figure out that this offensive line was not the same, that they couldn't play bully ball on these third and ones anymore. So yeah, like Dan Campbell's not a perfect play caller, but he's more than capable. And if they had last year's offensive line, like Dan Campbell could have got them to the Super Bowl. I believe that. I mean, Ben Johnson couldn't, but like, you know what I mean? Like his play calling wasn't the reason they were losing games to me. And they got better after Dan Campbell took over as the play caller. So why is that the breaking point, you ask? To me, it's like, okay, he ran out of bandwidth. He ran out of gas when he did have to take over as the play caller, because all of a sudden Calvin Shepard is alone on defense as a first-year play caller with no one to really lean on. All of a sudden, the defense goes from allowing 21 points per game in the first half of the season. After Dan Campbell takes over, they're allowing 25, 26 points per game on the defensive side of the football. Not to mention, like we talked about it when we first opened up the show, the Steelers game, the Vikings game, they came out completely flat in both of those. So I think like Dan Campbell having to focus in on this one area took away from what he's best at. And to me, that's being the CEO. That's being the leader, the vocal leader that's going to get everyone pumped up for these games, the guy who's going to motivate his team. And if Calvin Shepard needs to lean on him, or whoever they hire as OC needs to lean on him, he's going to be able to help out in a lot of different ways. Well, his focus was so directly on the play calling and coming up with an offensive scheme on a week-to-week basis that he was stretched too thin throughout the course of the season. And I think that's when you started to see everything as a whole just slowly start to take over, kind of start to fall off of a cliff there. So, yes, Dan Campbell, of course, deserves a little bit of blame for the way that the season went. It'd be ridiculous to say he doesn't, but I think we can just go back to the offseason and be like, that John Morton hire was a lot more disastrous than we thought he was. He had great skill players around him. They still put up points. They were fine offense, but I think Dan Campbell having to take over as the play caller actually affected the team more than we realized, in ways that we didn't realize at the time. But now looking back, probably a negative impact.
Did you feel like at times it's hard. Like I can't disagree with you in terms of the amount of points the Lions scored, right? But like there are times I just felt like it was almost like a fantasy football offense, meaning like it's like, hey, 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1, we can't get a big first down, right? Mm-hmm. Like it just felt like inconsistent for whatever reason, and it could be all the things we've already talked about. Dan, for me, like I think the blame, like I mentioned already, is the last 3 games, right? Steelers, Vikings, and you can even argue the Packers on Thanksgiving. It was just it was go time, man, and like they didn't come to play. And what's crazy, the other part too, is like at times in the NFL, right, you're gonna have those clunkers, right? There are teams that lose games, and you look back and you're like, oh, or maybe that was a tougher game than it should have been. So like the Lions, like they struggled against the Giants, right? That was a good win. But the Lions lost, like after they beat the Buccaneers on that Monday night game, they lost a clunker against the Vikings, right? They lost a clunker against the Steelers recently, and then they lost a clunker against the Vikings again. I mean, it's like you want to pinpoint, like those 3 games go differently. You know what I mean? The Lions are hosting a playoff game. So
a lot of those games, I think, go differently if Kirby Joseph's just healthy too, because almost all the scores were, other than the Kansas City game and other than this Minnesota game, I believe all of their losses were 1 score. That's just a play on the defense that you got to be able to make at some point. I felt like the Lions, they just didn't make those big-time plays. I know Campbell had a couple. Hutchinson had the one against the Giants, I guess, but they shouldn't have been in that game in the first place. The Lions desperately missed Kirby Joseph, because I've always said, like, Brian Branch, more of a down-to-down impact player. To me, probably a better overall player than Kirby Joseph, just because you can do so many things with him. But that one play that Joseph makes throughout the course of a game changes the game, and they miss that player the entire season.
I think we could all pinpoint a different moment. And I actually, your guys' post, I reposted it on our page and put a comment on it, and it went crazy on ours as well. Because so everybody had their own, opinion on it, and everybody had their own point on it, because there's so many things, there's so many issues. But my thing, you brought up Kirby Joseph. I thought Brian Branch was the death nail, because if you notice, like all of a sudden they're getting gashed in the run game once Brian Branch came out, because their run fits from the safety position were so bad once Branch went out. And it's like when Branch is playing, man, he's flying up in the run game. So many times, not only just making tackles, 4 or 5 yards down the field, there were times where he'd be making tackles in the backfield. Like he was just incredible at being able to read the run. And once he came out, man, like they were getting like the Steelers game, I think they gave up 2 45-yard runs for touchdowns. The Vikings, they gave up the 80-yard jet sweep. Like those are plays that Branch shuts down. And once he was gone, I thought he was a huge, huge factor. And then the other one was Sam Laporta offensively, because, when he went out, all of a sudden they couldn't get 4th downs anymore. They just were not making their 4th down conversions like that. And that started, I think his first game out was, believe that Philly game when they went 0 for 5 on 4th down. And then they the next couple games, they couldn't get 4th down. I think it was 7 in a row that they missed on 4th down. And Laporta is so huge on those 4th downs, because a lot of it's 4th and 2, 4th and 3, where you could run it and it's a lot of play action, and Laporta makes it look like he's going to pass run block, and then he releases in a route. And his chemistry with Goff has been incredible. So those 2 injuries I thought were just absolutely killer.
And Dan, Ben makes a great point about Kirby Joseph too, because you talk about baseball all the time with guys having the clutch gene. It just kind of felt like Kirby Joseph made plays, right? Like those big tight clutch type plays. You'd have felt like, you know what I mean?
Well, to Dan's point too, the safeties. I mean, people were getting mad at DJ Reed and Amik Robertson for how much they were giving such a cushion. It felt like the last 2 games against Aaron Rodgers, and I guess it wasn't so much against Max Crosby, but Aaron Rodgers just 8-yard slant whenever he wanted because they were giving so much cushion. That's because the safeties can't keep anybody contained over the top. And then when you're talking about the run stuff, so I know everyone Avonte Maddox, you did a really good job filling in. Sure, in a nice spot, he's a nice safety 4. At the end of the day, in the last 3 weeks of the season, he missed 4 tackles, which when you're the last line of defense and you miss a tackle, probably going for a touchdown. So Avonte Maddox missed 4 tackles in the last 3 weeks of the season. And as for our friend Thomas Harper, he missed 3 in the last 2 weeks. So that's just going to result in the big time runs. The safeties don't always come up as the guys that are these run stoppers. And you mentioned Branch obviously being one of the best in the league at it. But if they're missing tackles, there's nobody else. They're the safety. They're the last line of defense. And those guys stunk it up in the last few weeks of the season.
Do you guys think potentially the Lions look at their scheme defensively and their philosophy changes a little bit? Because it didn't seem to change much from Aaron Glenn to Kelvin Shepherd in terms of play a lot of man, bring some pressure, things like that, right? And receivers in the NFL are good. I mean, maybe the best they've ever been, right? Sure. So I wonder if it's at some point they because the talk was always hey, you got to get Aiden Hutchinson help on the other side, right? Hey, so by the way, Max Crosby's probably going to be available, right? You know what I'm saying? But there's always that, right? So maybe you do play a little more zone, and so you're not relying on those guys to cover and hope your front 4 can get home. But I wonder, because I thought that with Aaron Glenn, right? There were times it just felt God, you can't get off the field. But I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it, and
sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good.
If they were a little bit more malleable, Kelvin Shepherd this season, I think it maybe plays out a little bit differently, because we saw it in the Tampa game. They played a lot more zone, and then they went right back to just being you know what? No, we're manning up. Yeah. The problem is, if you're going to man up and the whole Aaron Glenn, Kelvin Shepherd thing, I don't necessarily disagree with that scheme. And kind of zagging when everyone else is playing this Fangio thing of don't let anybody deep. The Lions have always been content with allowing the deep ball because you couldn't run on them. The only way to score on the team was the explosive plays. You weren't going to run on them, and you weren't going to dink and dunk your way up the field. The problem was everything fell apart when suddenly, everybody could run on the Lions. The run defense, I think, completely fell apart the last couple of weeks of the season. Like we said, part of it was some of the safeties. And part of it was just, I don't know, these defensive tackles just weren't playing their best football. I mean, Ali McNeil, if he doesn't return to his 2024 version of himself, that looks like one of the worst contracts on the team. And, part of that's coming back from an ACL injury. But, I mean, week 1 next year, we better see that impact, because he's going from $6 million to, I want to say, $28 million as a cap hit next season. So that's a guy expected to be a Pro Bowler. That's the expectation when you give him that contract extension. He didn't play like one this year, and it showed in the last couple of weeks when everybody was running all over this team.
Dan, you want to move on, but we had a conversation after that Tampa Bay game about that exact thing. The Lions played a lot of zone and they were tacklers in space, right? Dan, I don't know if you remember that conversation, but it was like, oh, wow, like they schemed them up a little bit. Like that's coaching right there, man. Those backups tackle guys in space. And like, that was the last time I felt.
Yeah, but they followed it up with the Kansas City game. And if you remember the Kansas City game, they played a lot of zone and Mahomes torched them.
Yeah.
He absolutely torched them. And Shepard came back after that game and said, you know what? We have a lot of injuries. We tried to play a little more zone, but that's not who we are. I don't care who our personnel is. We're going to get back to who we are, and we're going to get back to playing man defense. And that's what they did, and it was successful for a little while. But eventually, I mean, people don't want to bring up injuries. They always want to say next man up. But when you have the most injuries in the league 2 years in a row, I think last year was by far they had the most. I think this year they're second. And it's where the injuries, take place. I mean, their entire secondary is just decimated. You lose both safeties. You lose Rakestraw at the beginning of the year, you thought was going to be a top 3 corner. You lose Arnold halfway through the year. DJ Reed gets a big injury, misses a ton of time. When he comes back, he just didn't look like the same player. Like your secondary is completely decimated. And it goes back to what you said, Brian. Like it's hard to play man defense in this league with a bunch of third and fourth stringers, man.
Yeah.
And not only was it the entire secondary, like where it happened, those are 2 of the 5 best safeties, 2 of the 3 best safeties in the NFL. Like we went into this year thinking we had the best safety tandem in the NFL. So for both of those all-pro caliber guys to get hurt, you're not replacing it. That's why, don't get me wrong, I had bones to pick with Brad Holmes and some of the decisions he's made the last couple of years. But when everyone's like, "Oh, he should have made a move at the deadline," what do you want him to do? Trade for 3 new starters on the line? Like that just doesn't happen,
right? Yeah, the Browns weren't trading Myles Garrett. I mean, they just weren't, right? I mean, Tony Dungy used to talk about all the time, like you help your secondary out by having a great defensive line, too. And we think of the Buccaneers teams that he had with those awesome defensive lines. Like, I wonder, I mean, again, it's going to be a really interesting offseason to maybe help, like, obviously relying on those guys to get healthy, but, like, do you build more depth there with your draft picks, or do you build in the front 7? It's going to be wild.
And just want to circle back to the coaching issue. And, Ben, you mentioned how, Dan Campbell taking on play calling was probably just too much for him. Like he needs to step back and he needs to be the CEO of this team. But that brings up who calls the plays then next year. And if they're obviously going to have to bring in a different offensive coordinator, but who do they bring in? And do they bring in somebody that's, not from this system? And they bring in kind of an outsider and they change things up and they change up how the calls are played and the whole system? Or do they bring in somebody who's familiar with the system? Like, what are your thoughts, Ben? Who do you think is, maybe some names or at least a style of coach that you would like to see them get to come in and call plays?
I hope they go a little bit more outside the box this time around, because I know like they promote Shepard from within, and technically John Morton wasn't a hire from within person, but he kind of was. I mean, you rented him away to Sean Payton for 9 months, but he was there when the Ben Johnson offense was created. And I think Holmes and Campbell just like, they didn't want to completely move off of that. So they were like, let's bring someone in who's familiar. And they hired a guy who was ultimately underqualified to be the offensive coordinator for this team. So I do expect him to go look elsewhere. I don't think Calvin Shepard gets fired. I think that's probably crazy. Let's put that at 10% chance of happening. But yeah, they're going to move on from John Morton. Maybe he's still welcome in the booth. But the guys that I've been thinking about, Mike McDaniel, if he ends up getting fired from Miami, that's a guy who's always had a super creative run game, has always maximized his run game, even without a great offensive line in Miami, and has always really benefited from having speedsters on his team, whether that's Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, who had the best season of his career statistically with Mike McDaniel. So those guys all benefited from Mike McDaniel. Now think about what he could do for Gibbs, what he could do for Jameson Williams. I think that would be my most ideal hire. Obviously, that would require the Dolphins moving on from him, which sounds like it's about 50-50 if you kind of read between the lines on some of these national reports. And then the other guy that I wrote down was Mike McCarthy, who's currently unemployed. And I think that kind of just rubs Lions fans the wrong way right away, just because, former Packers guy and then a former Cowboys guy, obviously, hated him for so many years. But 3 straight 12-win seasons in Dallas, a top 5 scoring offense from 2021 to 23. Whether you want to like him as a person or not, whether you think he's dull or not, they were put up numbers in Dallas. They always did, and they did in Green Bay too. So I think that's an outside the box hire that could end up, Mike McCarthy just. I mean, he's not going to be your head coach. You don't need him to be the leader. Just all you have to do is focus on the offense, and I think the rest would take care of itself.
Brian, what do you think?
I think somebody like McCarthy would be like the safest pick, obviously, because he has a pretty good track record. And then, like you said, Mike McDaniel, I love their stuff, but it's, again, depending on what the Dolphins do. Like, an outside the box person to me is like I'm a big Chip Kelly fan, man. Like, I think he brings some fun, and I don't know exactly what happened with the Raiders, right? But again, he has a track record of maybe not as a head coach, but his schemes have always been good, and putting guys in space and maximizing their talent. So somebody like that, I just think if you're going to build your team with so many, like, you have so many skill weapons. Again, they have 2 number 1 receivers really on their offense. They'd be number 1s on a lot of other teams, and a tight end would be a number 1, and 2 all-league running backs. Like, you got to maximize them, to the nth degree. And to me, somebody like Chip Kelly would be an off-the-wall hire. And if not Chip Kelly, like, this guy's not going to come here. But I'm a big fan of Cliff Kingsbury schemes with what he's done historically, and like what they did in Washington to the Lions in the playoffs last year. Somebody like that.
Yeah, so we bring up this topic comes up all the time. Every show brings it up, and Brian brings it up all the time. Like, is the Lions window closed? And it's Super Bowl window closed. And after a season like this, a lot of people are going to say that it is. But Ben, I'm going to start with you. Like, can the Lions bounce back next season? Like, after this disappointing season, so many injuries, coaching issues, like, can the Lions bounce back next season and get back to being a Super Bowl contender?
Yes, undoubtedly, yes. I don't subscribe to the window theory, especially with this team who, like we said, was decimated with the injuries for the second consecutive season. And that's not even an excuse. It's just a factual thing that has happened the last couple of years. It's going to stink to lose a guy like Alex Anzalone, which I think the writing's kind of been on the wall since training camp with that one. But like we said, hopefully Lee McNeil is back to his self in 2024. They'll get Brian Branch back. They'll get Sam Laporta back. Who knows what's going on with Kirby Joseph? I don't think anybody really understands what's going on with that one. But if he comes back, that's a reason that they're going to get better too. I look at the Rams, who had 5 wins the year after they won the Super Bowl. They're back to being the best team in the NFL. I look at the 49ers, who had 4 wins last year and is now in prime position to go on a playoff run here, playing on Sunday Night Football against the Bears right now. There's teams that can bounce back, and the Lions are certainly one of those teams. They're going to be playing a 4th place schedule this year or next year if Minnesota wins next week, or if the Lions lose to the Bears week 18, which probably expected at this point. And the 4th place teams they would play would be the Titans, the Cardinals, and the Giants. I feel like this team can bounce back.
What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I gotta give our boy Carl, give him a hard time. Like, I'm, again, big Chip Kelly fan, but like, okay, somebody who has a history of being a little dynamic, right? Eric Bieniemy. Like, I know it was Andy Reid's scheme, but like, still, somebody who's gonna be dynamic. Cliff Kingsbury, like I said. But no, I agree with Ben. I mean, I don't think their window's closed, but I've said it. I said it last year. Like I think their best shot.
Oh, I gotta get you out of there. You've said the window is closed many a times.
Okay, closed, like completely shut. I just think their best opportunity, their best chance, it already happened. I believe that. So like, there's so many ifs right now. Like, if they stay healthy, if they if the offense or if the coordinators are better, if they get more depth, or if they get better. Like, I just think there's so many ifs, and the league is a lot better. There'll be teams better next year that we don't expect either. Like, look at the Patriots this year. You know what I mean? The Seahawks this year, right? Like, so many variables. So I just think it's hard. I mean, do I think they're a playoff team, especially with next year's schedule? Sure. I think their best chance has already passed us by, Dan.
It's going to be hard to top what they had going for them in 2023 with a 17-point lead at halftime and the NFC Championship game. Mike, and Campbell said it, man. He told his players, "We might never get back here," and that's a statement that's kind of haunting us all right now.
And that's something that that I don't like that either. I mean, like, what are you doing? Like, it
was a little odd.
Like, man, like, I don't know if you say that. Like, again, they're all grown men and adults. I don't think they're losing sleep over that comment. But, like, I don't know. I just, I think, I don't know if
he's right.
I think he's right. I do think he's right. Yeah, I do. I think that was it. Like, a lot has to go right for this team to be a Super Bowl champion or Super Bowl, participant.
Well, Ben, for this window to not be closed, what are the biggest things that they need to do this offseason, do you feel?
They need to hire a slam dunk offensive coordinator first and foremost. And they got to go find some guys to play on the offensive line. I think whether that's in the draft or free agency, you look at the right side of the line with Sewell and Ratledge, and you feel pretty good about those guys. You have to be prepared for the worst case scenario with Taylor Decker after how bad Frank Ragnow screwed you over last offseason. So, like, you can't let that happen again. You got to look Taylor Decker right in the face. It's the second the season's done. Be like, dude, you got to tell us what's going on as soon as possible, because he already floated the idea around of retirement at the early stage of this season when he sat out 2 games in a row. He was like, yeah, like it was tough getting to training camp this year. And it's like, okay, man, like, you got to tell us before free agency, unlike your buddy Frank Ragnow that ended up screwing over this team. So potentially 3 new starters on the offensive line. The tackle, if Taylor Decker ends up packing it up, it's probably going to come in the first round of the draft, I'd imagine. I would say those 2 things. This is how the team has been successful the last couple of years. It's been built in the trenches. And this year, the last 2 games were total evidence that this team was not built in the same way at all.
Ben, I'm going to put you on the spot then. Is Frank Ragnow returning? What does your gut tell you?
No. Something doesn't add up about that. I don't know about you guys, but something still just doesn't sit right in my stomach about what happened during Thanksgiving, because everything I've read, if you have a grade 3 hamstring, you can't walk. So how, like, what was going on there? I don't know. Something about that doesn't sit right with me.
Well, I mean, it's something we might never know. But that supposedly he was training to come back, and the injury, so mentally he was coming back. This is my thought. Mentally he was coming back. He tore it in training. He was going to. I think he would have tried to play through it. And then once he had the physical, they realized, yeah, there's no way. Like, we can't sign you to bring you back out of retirement. You have a torn hamstring. But he's ridiculous, man. Like, his injury tolerance and pain tolerance is off the charts, man. Some of the stuff that he played with, what was it, a torn triceps, I think, last season that he played for almost the entire year. Like, he's nuts. The guy's nuts, man. Like, I think he just thought, it's probably just a bad strain. I'll just fight through it. It'll be fine. Let's come back. Let's do this. I'm mentally ready to go. Let's do this. And then he had the physical, and they found it.
And we talked, and you mentioned, both you guys talked about, like, certain moments of the season when you were like, oh man, that was it. Like, in a way, I feel like that whole scenario negatively impacted the entire morale of the organization, and the fan base. Cause it was like, remember we talked about it, like, hey, they finally got some good news, man. Like, let's go. This is pretty cool. And then, just kidding. Right.
Well, at the timing of it too, because it was the day or 2 before the Thanksgiving game, when it was felt like the season was on the line, or at least the division was on the line, and they lose that game. And then you find out after that, where you're already disappointed that they lost. You feel like, man, maybe the division's out of reach now, but at least they can still make the playoffs and maybe make a run, especially if Ragnow's coming back. And then you find out Ragnow's not coming back. So if it's a gut punch to the entire fan base, it had to be a gut punch to that locker room too, man.
Especially for Graham, who's like, oh my God, is my job, like, am I being benched? And then it's like, hey, Graham, you still want to play center for us?
You're still our guy, right?
Well, how many times has that happened to him too? Like, I go back to this. To me, you can go all the way back to the second day of training camp, right? So they find out that Ragnow is going to retire. Now, did Brad Holmes know, or at least have a thought that this could happen? And if he did, was the plan, okay, we're going to draft Ratledge to be the center, whether it's the center now or it's the center in year 2, year 3, like, he's going to be the center that's going to replace Ragnow. Well, Ragnow retires. Well, all right. We're going to go to plan B. It's Ratledge. Ratledge is the center for the first 2 days of training camp. And it must have been so bad that they couldn't just operate the offense, that you have to move him from center and move him to guard and then move Glasgow. And then you're going to plan C at center with Glasgow. And Ratledge never stepped back into center. So to me, that all goes back to Brad Holmes and like being prepared for Ragnow's retirement, whether he knew or didn't. Like the plan was obviously for Ratledge, and it totally blew up in their face. So now you got to go with Glasgow, who never wasn't really playing that well to begin with. Now you got to put him at center, and an aging veteran who's had injury issues, he gets banged up, and now you're going in the must-win situations against Pittsburgh and Minnesota. You have basically your fourth string center, and you're getting bad snaps that result in fumbles at the NFL level. That cannot happen. And to me, that all goes back to that second day of training camp when they realized that Ratledge can't play center, and they had to go to Glasgow.
I don't think Holmes knew in the early stages of free agency, because I think Zeitler would have been back if there was any sort of indication that Frank was going to retire. I think he might have known in the draft, and that's why he ended up taking Miles Frazier late, so they took 2 interior guys. But like Glasgow, this is like my least favorite stat from the playoff game last year. He allowed 10 pressures to Washington. 10. That is an insane number for a guard to allow, for anybody to allow, let alone a guard. So for him to be back in like a more important role, I thought was just insane. And if they knew Frank Ragnow was coming back, I think Zeitler would have been back as well, which I don't know. I don't know how much it would have changed, but in my mind, it changes everything. It's coping.
Well, Ben, this has been awesome, man. We really appreciate you coming on. Where can fans find you on social media, and where can they find your radio show?
Yeah, 100.9 The Mid up here in the Great Lakes Bay region, Midland, Saginaw, and Bay City. And we're live every day on YouTube as well. So even if you don't live in that region, live from 9 to noon every morning on 100.9 The Mid. Just searching on YouTube.
And then social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Just search 100.9 The Mid and or The Ben Bosscher Show. You guys will find it.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
Ben, that was awesome, man. Thank you. We'd love to have you on again too if you're free. If you can fit it into your schedule, this was great stuff. Because
sure.
There's gonna be a lot to talk about.
Hit me up anytime.
All right, we will.
Awesome.
Thank
man.
you.
We appreciate it. Have a great night, man.
See you later.
Thanks, man.
All right.
He was pretty insightful. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, he made a lot of solid points, and like I think it hit me. Didn't necessarily hit me after the game on Christmas. It hit me today. Just like, gosh, like none of these games have interest to me right now because I know the Lions are out, and they don't hold it.
It's kind of how I feel about when the Tigers lose. It's just you're so invested, like you're so emotionally invested, and then that part of it's over. Yeah. It's hard to enjoy the rest, or at least for a little while. It's hard to like ramp it back up again and enjoy the other games. Like even today, it was just like, oh man, I don't I'm just not into this, because it was for so long, especially when the Lions, they didn't have anything, last year, I guess they didn't really have anything wrapped up to the degree, but it was still like this year, you're looking at all kind of the NFC and rooting against the other NFC teams to lose. And you're looking at different playoff scenarios and all that. Yeah. And today it was like the first day where it's like, oh, none of that really matters because the Lions are done and they're eliminated. It's just disappointing, man. Disappointing that this Week 18 Bears game, which we were so amped up for it. I mean, we talked with Sean Velich. I'm like, oh man, this could be the Sunday night football game, the last game of the year, like win or go home type game for both teams. And it turns out that it's not important for either team.
Yeah, and now we're talking about sitting guys so we can get a higher draft pick and get the fourth, get the last place schedule and that sort of thing. Just crazy how it all works out. But I wish we had more time and maybe we could talk to him again. And he touched on a little bit like Jared Goff's cap number next year, right? And how much he's going to go toward the cap. And like, I know the cap, and he mentioned it, typically goes up 10% every year or whatever it is, but like, golly, like that's a huge number for your quarterback.
Well, the Lions have been just an incredibly disappointing season, but a team that did not have a disappointing season for the most part, there was some disappointing times, but is the Detroit Tigers, and finished, got to the second round of the playoffs for the second year in a row. have the best farm system in all of baseball, and that's something we want to get into the second part of this show. And with that, we'll bring on our next guest. It is from the Tigers minor league report is Roger Castillo, and there's no person that I'd rather talk to when it comes down to Tigers prospects and coverage of the minor leagues and the Tigers minor league system is Roger. Just does a phenomenal job, him and his team, with the Tigers minor league report. So Roger, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Oh, there we go. So Roger,
thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yep, there we go. I think you reviewed it at the first part there.
Okay.
That's all good.
Yeah, man, good stuff. Thanks for being here. Fired up. We had some miscommunication last week, but never a bad time to talk Tiger baseball heading into the first of the year. And how many days? Like I'm consistently looking at springtrainingcountdown.com. I think we're at like 45, 46 days until pitchers and catchers report, and can't wait, man. Can't wait. We're excited. But your job never seems to end, right? You're always going, and baseball's on your mind, 24/7, 365 days of the year.
Yeah, it is right now we're kind of weird, reaching a weird period of time right now where the Tigers are not really active per se. I mean, there's been a lot of just signing relievers and what have you. But for us right now at our website, we're trying to get our new updated list going. We're working on some reports, including some of the guys that they signed in the minor league Rule 5 draft. So it's never a dull moment, but it is nice in the last 2 weeks or so. We've been able to kind of wind it down. We have some big changes on the way, in a good way for our site to continue our coverage. And we're going to start a GoFundMe soon to hopefully get down to spring training this year, because going down to spring training is such a really good experience to go see some of those guys ahead of time. And you feel like you get ahead of the curve a little bit as far as prospects, but even as the big league club too, you get a more casual view of the team a little bit. And it's nice because everybody's not as wound up to start this. Everybody's eager, they're talking to the media for the first time, comparatively speaking, in October, where they're just like, I'm over it.
Right. Well, before we get into the minor leagues and talk about some of the prospects, right, I want to get your perspective on the offseason for the Tigers. Kind of not necessarily the splash moves, but definitely productive in terms of just kind of bringing back the team that they had last year with their signings, bringing back Flaherty on a 1-year deal, bringing back Torres on the 1-year qualifying deal, re-signing Finnegan to a 2-year, $19 million deal, and then also bringing in Kenley Jansen on a 1-year, $11 million deal. Just want to get your general thoughts on the Tigers offseason so far.
I think it's been very, as you said, very productive, and I think it's also indicative on what they've tried to address, which is the bullpen. They really ran out of gas last year. You noticed in the playoffs, AJ Hinch was trying to use as much as every advantage he had, but you could tell Tyler Holton was getting a little gassed out a little bit. And injuries to guys like Sawyer Gibson-Long and Reese Olson, they lost some of that starter depth. And I'm surprised they haven't. I mean, they signed Drew Anderson from Korea, and they're going to use him as a starter, but I can see him more being a reliever at this point. So I think the Tigers, I think Kyler Montero took another step forward, but he's still kind of a question mark, in my opinion, in a sense of like, is he going to be able to be a 6 or 7 starter? Is he going to start in the rotation? But overall, though, I think they've done a really good job of addressing all the pitching needs. The offense, I still think, needs to be addressed, and hopefully that happens here in the next month or so, because, you expect Riley Green, and I just did an article on Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson being the first drafted pair to hit 30 home runs in Tigers history. 30 home, like, that's never happened. Like, usually you think of like the days of Cecil Fielder and all, those guys were not drafted guys. So is the offense going to take another step forward? Is Colt Keefe going to fulfill the role at third base? Those questions still need to be answered, and I think hopefully the Tigers are able to address that here in the next month or so.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the offense, because I was going to ask you about that. Like, I was going to ask you if you're surprised there hasn't been more of an emphasis on that. But again, like Dan and I have talked a lot, like we kind of think they'll compete in the American League Central, obviously, like even if they bring back their current lineup, right? But like, what do you think? I mean, not to put you on the spot, what do you think is going to happen from an offensive perspective in the next couple months, if anything?
Coach, I think they have to I think that I've talked about this numerous times. I think they have to be creative in a trade sense because if you look at the free agent market right now, Bregman, I don't think Bregman's coming here, and I hate to disappoint Tiger fans that way, but if the fact that you can either, there's been rumors about him going to Arizona, Boston hasn't pulled the trigger either, or on Bichette, excuse me, and I think that, Harris has not tipped his hand at all. So he's been very, very just close to the vest. And I know he said about some of looking at offensive options eternally and improving the roster, whatever the heck that means. I know that's GM speak to everybody. And I think sometimes to fans, he comes off kind of setting, which why I think fans drives him nuts. He hasn't signed a big name, but I digress. But I think what they're going to do offensively is I think they're going to give Colt Keith. They like Colt Keith a lot. He's going to get regular at bats. The question is whether he's going to be at third or Torres is going to be your everyday second baseman. Now you have to figure out how to put in Kevin McGonigal in there. And I don't think Kevin McGonigal will start the team. It's going to start the year in Detroit. I think he's going to start the year in Toledo because they're very steadfast on putting these guys in Toledo before they get to the big leagues. It's very regimen. I know to us, it's like the guy can hit. Kevin McGonigal is clearly a great one of the best offensive prospects the Tigers have ever had. And we'll get back to him in a second, but I still think you have to address the outfield because Kerry Carpenter and Riley Green had a really good year last year, but you guys see how Riley Green runs sometimes. It's almost like a stab, like he's been stabbed in the legs. Like it reminds me of Brian Buxton. You have to treat him like Brian Buxton in the sense of he's a very good offensive. He's good offensively, but he's 25. You don't want the guy to break down already. Yeah. And so I think that you have to. I think personally they should get another bat for the outfield. And the Tigers right now, if you look at all the free agent signings, they haven't signed one single, not even a minor league free agent in the outfielder or anything like that. So I think that hopefully in the next month or so, Harris addresses that because I think that's the ultimate screaming need right now is to address the depth in the offense on the offensive side. Because if you're not going to make Kevin McGonigal your everyday shortstop to start the season, you can put Baez in the outfield. That's great. But you still have question marks of Parker Meadows. Is Parker Meadows going to go back to what he was before? Yeah. So I think they really should address those things because, quite frankly, if you look at the rest of the AL Central, the White Sox are getting more aggressive. You have the Pirates making moves in the NL, so they have to address the offense this next couple weeks or so.
Well, Dan and I talked about that a lot, and with the roster, right? Like you mentioned, Parker Meadows, Matt Vierling. Like, is he gonna fight for at bats? Right? Does Kerry Carpenter is he still a platoon type guy, or does he get more at bats? Like, I still think what do you do with Zach McKinstry? Right? If Colt Keith is your everyday third baseman, Dan and I have talked exclusively about that. So that's to your point about maybe being creative with a trade because there's just not enough at bats and innings for everybody offensively.
Yeah, and you the one thing about McKinstry too is that at least McKinstry you can plug and play with him anywhere. The thing about Verling is a really good clubhouse guy, and so a good healthy Matt Verling could do almost the same thing McKinstry can, but give you a little more firepower, a little more power. But the question is he going to be able to go back to what he was doing beforehand before all the injuries happened? So, I think that's why you have to make a trade too, because you think about Jace Young, for example, and Malloy, who I don't think has cleared waivers as of yet. If he hasn't cleared waivers and he gets picked up, he goes back to Toledo, then you feel a little better. But my biggest concern, offensively speaking, is where is the right-handed power going to come from outside of Spencer Torkelson? You need another right-handed bat, a guy that can at least hit for average. And the reason why I mentioned Jace Young is because he's a guy who I think the Tigers are going to need to move on from at some point. Because if he's just going to sit in Toledo, what's the point?
Yeah. Is there any right-handed bats free agent-wise? I know you mentioned a possible trade, but is there any free agents that are kind of still out there that you think maybe not, at the Bregman level, but maybe, a mid-tier or lower tier guy that could step in here and be a factor as a right-handed bat?
As far as free agents go, there's not really any guys that to me stand out right now that are kind of in that kind of vein of what the Tigers are looking for, because it's the free agent market in terms of offensive bats right now has been, the Suarez is still out there. You have old friend of the Tigers, Willie Castro, who I think is like as far as like a switch hitter goes. Of course, Bichette. That would be the dream, right? Bregman, Bichette.
Yeah.
You have Harrison Bader, but I think he's going to be a guy that's going to cost a little bit too much. But that's really about. I mean, there's really, I believe it's just a matter of really if the Tigers are going to settle for a guy like that and a guy who can come in and look at somebody like, for example, Suarez. That's a guy who's going to want full-time bats, right? So I know he said he wanted to come here. I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind Suarez for a one-year deal, honestly, for third base until you figure out what you're going to do. But really, that's really about it. That's why I was saying that a trade might need to happen because offensively speaking, this has been, to me, more of a pitcher's market. There's been some good pitchers you've been able to pick up. But I don't see a right-handed bat right now, outside the ones I just mentioned, that really kind of makes those guys excited.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like if they're going to get somebody, it does kind of need to be to trade because you're going to have to move some of these guys. They have so many guys that kind of fall in that range with the McKinstries, the Veerlings, the Meadows. We haven't even talked about Wenzel Perez. They're all kind of in that same vein where they're not, they're not game changers, but they're nice players. But they're not middle of the lineup, right-handed hitters, which feels like they just need one. Like if they could just get that one, and I think that's a lot of the frustration within the fan base is like, it feels like they haven't made that one move that can get them over the hump. And that's been the feeling across Detroit sports, entirely. It's like, make that one move to get them over the hump. But it feels like the Tigers are just right there and they could just get that one right-handed bat that could be the difference maker that could take them potentially to being a World Series contender. Like, what are your thoughts, Roger, on like that, just that whole idea of like, hey man, just Harris and Illich, can we just make that one move to get us over the hump, to get us to being a World Series contender?
Dan, I think you're on to something with like the fans' frustration. Really, is that kind of that big move, like big signature move. I mean, even with Avila, for example, Avila he traded whatever he could for whatever his trades weren't good. Let's just be honest here. But I think Dave Dombrowski spoiled us because Dave Dombrowski every winter time was always like, let's go. Once he opened up the pocketbook, even before he started opening up the pocketbooks to sign people, he was creative in his trades. I mean, they got Carlos Guillen for basically, they fleeced Seattle for that. They were able to fleece the Marlins for one of the greatest Tigers of all time, Miguel Cabrera. They were able to be creative. And, from what I hear, that a lot of these teams don't want to deal with Harris because he's asking for specific types of players, and he's very rigid with that. And at some point he has to compromise. And so when you hear that, that's why Tiger fans are upset. They're like, well, dude, come on. What are you going to do here? He doesn't want to give us prospects. See, and as a guy, the Tigers this is the most prospect depth they've ever had. But to me, as my partner Chris Brown would say, you use prospects like currency. Use that to get what you need to do. And I think if the problem is, though, they might value, for example, they might ask the Pirates, hey, you want Jace Young? And they're like, no. So it depends on the value of the Tigers' value in terms of prospects. Other teams are noticing them. That happened in the Rule 5 draft. What they're able to get for Kyle Finnegan was pretty impressive. So I think that it's just a matter of pulling the trigger. It depends on what's out there, really. It's Detroit, like the Kendall Marte idea. The Tigers are not on his no trade list. Why not him? But then you also got 5 second basemen at this point. Yeah. So it really depends on what the team wants to address. And I think they want to find somebody that's in lockable control. And I think that might be too much to ask. But Harris, it seems like he has to change his rigid ways. And that, I hope that happens here in the next month or so, where he kind of goes, you know what? I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm just going to go for it.
Prospects as currency is a great comment, because I remember back in the day when the Tigers traded Humberto Sanchez for Gary Sheffield, and everybody was kind of like, holy heck, man, oh, what are they doing? Oh, that's a big, and Humberto Sanchez didn't really, turn out to be anything. But, it still, I think, goes back to, you mentioned the right-handed bat, both of you guys. Like, if Javier Baez is anywhere close to what he was with the Cubs, man, like, just the team is just immensely better. And I was thinking about this a little bit, like, Parker Meadows, to me, like Scott Harris, in his comments about, the player development, and you're going to see Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson's take that leap, right? Well, Parker Meadows didn't get an opportunity because he got hurt last spring, right? So his development was hindered. Like, I still think he's the everyday center fielder. Like, I'm maybe more high in that guy than a lot of people. But I guess I wonder, I mean, you Roger, you can talk about this, like, again, conversations about McGonigal, like, does he go play shortstop, and is he just your everyday shortstop? Well, then what do you do with Javi Baez? So, like, to your point, maybe he's in Toledo all season. I mean, kind of what are your thoughts there? I know I was a little all over the place, but
no, I get what you're saying. And Coach, I think the biggest thing with McGonigal is that, how long is he in Toledo for? Before, like, Baez's problem before last year was he wasn't healthy. That was his biggest problem. And when he got healthy, he was effective, and he was able to. He made the All-Star team play a position he never played before because his pure athleticism. He's a smart baseball player. He's one of those guys that you always talk about as a coach, where he just does the fundamental things the right way, playing the right way, and that's key for a guy who. I think the Tiger fans give him a bum rap, and I got really annoyed with it half the time because yes, he strikes out bad pitches. Well, no duh, that's what he was when the Cubs too. It doesn't matter. But as far as going back to Parker Meadows, since I saw him at West Michigan, the guy can cover so much range, and I'm not willing. I'm with you. I'm not going to give up on Parker Meadows just yet. I think with Parker Meadows is just if he's healthy and if he can get back to what he like robbing catch, like he's a very good defensive outfielder. When he's out there, the Tigers are a much better ball club defensively because you have Perez and Wright, who's got a really good arm, decent in left field, but Riley Green, don't put him in center field. Just leave him in left, leave him alone. Leave him, don't put him in center field. That's fine. But what you could do is you can start Baez, and if Baez struggles and Meadows struggle, if Meadows struggles and Baez gets off to a decent start, McGonigal's hitting the ball in Toledo, let's put Baez in center field, call it McGonigal. And then you have to address it at some point. So I'm not willing. I think what's interesting about Baez too is you put him and Torres, they weren't bad as a combo at short and second last year. So I'm interested to see what the Tigers will end up doing with him as far as they're going to split time with him or they're going to make him the everyday shortstop. That to me is going to be a one key thing in spring training, how AJ Hinch is going to start him off at it first.
Yeah, I think fair or not, Baez, people's issue with him is his contract, right? Like when you get a big contract and you're not performing, people are going to call him out, and that's right. That's just the nature of being a
right.
professional athlete. But no, I'm with you. Like the best case scenario would be McGonigal to hit the heck out of the ball in the spring, and then the Tigers feel like they're forced to bring him up, and then then you figure it out from there. But that's still to be seen.
Well, I'm interested, Roger, on your thoughts on Cole Keith. Like, if the Tigers just come out and say they go into opening day and they say Cole Keith is our starting third baseman. He's full, no platoon, no nothing. He is our starting third baseman. Like, how do you feel about Cole Keith, and can you think he can step in and be the everyday third baseman and be good there?
The one thing about Cole Keith is that he can hit. He can hit very well. His numbers indicate that. As far as playing third, he's serviceable at third. I'm not saying he's a Gold Glover at third, but ever since that shoulder injury he had a couple of years ago, and he's even kind of said that essentially because he didn't have surgery for it, unlike Bryce Rayner, the Tigers prospect, who had the same injury. It was so weird that two players had the same injury diving back in the first base, and they had the same kind of shoulder injury. It's bizarre, but I think Cole Keith can play third on a regular basis. I've been a big fan since Cole Keith since I first saw him the first time I saw him was in Lansing with West Michigan, and he was a guy who was seeing the ball at a relatively young age. Remember, guys, he's only like 22, 23. He just got married. He has done very well, and fans are really willing to give up to him, and I don't understand that at all. But I think he could play third base. What I'm intrigued is why Harris hasn't come out and flat out said it yet. He's like, I like Cole Keith. Okay, then why don't you just make him the third baseman? And then we can all stop talking about signing Alex Bregman. Guess what? They haven't done that yet. And that's where I'm wondering if they're waiting for something to happen to make this, to announce that. I think in terms of him playing second too, if he has to play second, Cole keeps he's got good range at second base too. He makes fundamental little errors thing, but I think at third he can hold his own. What I worry about sometimes is his arm strength. Is he's going to need some time. I think personally myself, I'd rather, if I'm being perfectly honest, he could play third, but I'd rather have him not necessarily platoon, but get some games off, maybe be the DH and then go back to third. You know what I mean? Like, just, I think he's a guy that is serviceable at third. Is he your long-term solution at third? It depends on how his shoulder is. It really, I mean, like I said, he worked with Alan Trammell in the Arizona Fall a couple of years ago to work on his throws, but I just worry about the range sometimes to his left. Can he make that tough play in the corner there? Can he range? I think the arm strength is where I have questions about.
I mean, ultimately, if he hits 280 and 25 to 30 home runs and drives in close to 100 runs, like, I think everybody will take whatever defensive deficiencies are there, right?
Right.
Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, to get into the Tigers farm system, you brought up McGonigal. The Tigers have the number one farm system all of baseball, and that hasn't been, the case in the past. You talked about Dombrowski, and it was, they never really had a great farm system, and they get prospects that they would trade to bring in the big names. But the philosophy seems to have changed. And where do you point where things have evolved since Scott Harris has come in? Like, were there changes with how they scouted? Was there changes of how they drafted? Just kind of give us a little bit of breakdown. What has changed to evolve this Tigers farm system since Scott Harris has come along?
Well, one person you can give a lot of credit to is Ryan Garco, who was under Al Avila when Al Avila brought him on board. And he's now the VP of player personnel. And he's done a really good job of the fundamentals things that the Tigers weren't used to. For example, like him and what Harris have been able to do is nutrition. It's something as simple as good food, good like proteins. I remember a couple of years ago, Isaac Pacheco and we were talking at West Michigan, and the biggest thing they were excited about was that they were getting better food. Beforehand, like the spread was maybe, I mean, I'm not kidding when I say hot and ready in sandwiches. It was like really scattered, but the infrastructure started to change a little bit. They started working out these guys, and they were working on swing, like just adding things to their, like, for example, adding more technology, using weighted balls for some of the guys to throw, and taking a guy aside and saying, hey, wait a minute. For example, Sawyer Gibson Long a couple of years ago wasn't throwing his change. He was used to throw a changeup in high school. Then they went outside and say, hey, why don't you start throwing that changeup again against lefties, because it'll help you get guys out. As a result, his strikeouts went up. So the Tigers started with Ryan Garco. That's one thing. The second thing I mentioned is the technology. And the third thing, too, is trusting their scouts more. Guys, I mean, if you look at Bo Brisky, Tarek Skubal, basically guys that are scouted in the West, they have a specific profile. If you look at in the Northeast, it's like guys like John, or if you look at, I'm thinking of the Northeast, like Jason Foley, for example, when he was here, he was a guy that was undrafted. Jackson Strong, another Northeast guy. There's certain areas that the Tigers are starting to focus on that are like up the middle athletes. They're starting to have a draft profile. They have guys that are up the middle, can hit low strikeouts, control the strike zone, as Harris has mentioned, and they follow that philosophy to a T. The pitching side of things, it doesn't matter necessarily velocity. It's more about control. And they've been able to implement that. And so the implementation of these guys trusting their scouts and having the ability to go, okay, this is a guy I have identified, and start relationships ahead of time. Tigers for so long, and Coach Brian, you can attest to this too, Coach Barnes, they have been terrible, absolutely terrible. They haven't developed a core players like this since '84.
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot, I mean, if anybody who remember going to the Tiger Stadium in the 90s and seeing how many guys they just literally were like, Greg Gore, like Steve Searcy, Kevin Ritt, like all the pitching is like they never like, or we got all excited about Danny Worth, like it was terrible.
Nate Cornejo, right? I remember being all excited about him.
Yeah. Adam Pettyjohn, like it was.
Yes.
Yeah, I can go on and on, but in terms of offensive hitters, I have not seen anything like this ever. It's all of my life. I've done this now for a decade, but going back watching the Tigers, I've never been able to see them develop infielders. They've never been able to do that. It's been terrible. Now you have Kevin McGonigal is one of the best hitting shortstops they've ever had. You have Max Clark, who just turned 21, who's a really good outfielder. And then you guys like Bryce Rayner, who's hitting the ball at 18 years old at 115 miles an hour. I'm not joking when I say that. Like, he's hitting it really hard, doing impactful there. The only thing they need to do better is to get their pitching developed, and I think they're going to continue to do that. But it has been a whole, like, they upgrade their facilities, all these little things that people don't think about. They got new dorms for the first time since the 60s, since like 71, 72. The little things. The infrastructure needed to change, and they've done that little by little, and that's made such a big difference.
Maybe Nick Castellanos. I mean, he's the closest thing, maybe, right?
Yeah.
He might be the closest thing, but then he didn't take off and become superstar status until he left Detroit, obviously, right? So
Right.
I have two questions for you. So who is a guy in their system that maybe right now isn't ranked in like the top 5 or 10, who's maybe down at single A, that you think could turn out to be like a legit dude just because he's so young? And then the second question is there anybody you think that could like make the leap, like kind of like Troy Melton did this year, right? And he became a huge part of their postseason run and the pitching staff. Like, is there anybody like that who could jump out?
So as far as like hitter wise, I have two guys I would have in mind for that. Franbir Mantilla, who was down in Lakeland, who's 20 years old, switch hitting guy who started hitting really well before I think he had a torn Achilles and ended up ending his season. But he's a guy who, internationally speaking, has the Tigers. He's done really well, and I think he's a guy that if he gets to West Michigan, it can continue his trend. I think he's guy that can sneak up on people. And John Peck, who ended the season in Erie last year. Guy can hit. The problem is that he's struggling with sliders, velocity, but he has got really good range in the infield. But if he can pick up on breaking balls, makes another improvement. I think John Peck's the guy to look out for. Drafted I believe out of Pepperdine. So that's a guy who was a right-handed bat. I thought he made some good leaps and bounds last year going through the system. As far as pitchers go, a guy that I really love a lot that has that Troy Melton impact is left-hander Andrew Sears, who is a maniac. If you watch Andrew Sears pitch, I mean, he's like literally like this. Like, he's an intense guy, and he is a lefty who got some good swing and miss stuff. Pitched very well in the area in the postseason. He's a guy who he reminds me, and you guys could attest to this too. Like, those hockey goalies, the weird guys that all goalies are like that. Sears is like that. He's a very intense guy, but has really 3 good pitches, a slider, fastball, and a good change. And I think he's a guy that, if he continues his upward trend in Erie, I think he's a guy that could maybe get a call up at the end of the season next year, because I think he's one of the few arms that the Tigers have depth-wise that could make that leap. And if he comes back, and another arm I have in mind too, who Chris has talked about this guy quite a bit. And Jake Miller is a guy that the Tigers put on their 40-man roster for a reason. Miller had a couple of surgeries, so hopefully Miller can make an impact. But one arm, real quick, is Kyle Witherspoon, who they just drafted, 21-year-old, who I think once the Tigers get with him and tinker him a little bit, his brother also got drafted, has a better upside. He got drafted higher in the draft. I think Witherspoon's a guy who can come out of the gate quickly for him.
Is there anybody maybe at AAA right now? Like, I'm thinking like a Max Anderson type or Hangi Lee, like these guys that have kind of been in the system for a little bit, got moved up to Toledo. Are those guys that maybe could potentially win a spot going into opening day? Now, like the Tigers roster seems like so set in a lot of ways right now that there might not be any openings. But those are guys that feel like they're kind of knocking on the door. Is there any opportunity for those guys to step up?
As far as like Hangi Lee goes, I think Hangi Lee, the biggest thing for him is that defensively he can handle both positions, second and third. The problem is that what I'm concerned with is he's still young for his level. So I think if he can get off to a really good start, I think Hangi Lee could be an impactful bat for the Tigers. My concern is this and Harris addressed this, he's still swinging out of his true stops. Like he struggles with high velocity sometimes. He started hitting it better towards the end of the year in Toledo. But I think Hayu Lee would be one of those examples. And you mentioned Max Anderson, and this is where I think the Tigers have a problem right now. They could trade either if a team was interested in Hayu Lee or Max Anderson. There was like I heard this secondhand, but I was reassured from a confirmed source that Anderson thought he was going to be traded in July, and he started slumping towards the second half of the season because he thought he was going to be traded. Based off what you were just saying, all these guys that have the Tigers roster is pretty much set, and so put in there Jace Lee, who the Tigers were trying to shop him around, nobody was interested, from what I heard, and so you have a good Toledo team, but I think out of the three I mentioned, I think Lee's the only one that I think is going to be knocking at the door. I mean, Anderson I think will too. Like, don't get me wrong, Max Anderson played third in Arizona Fall League and did not too bad of a job. That being said, is he going to come out and win the spot out of spring training over Cole Keefe? No, I don't think so, because I don't know if Anderson's going to be able to hit from enough power. The power is there, but I think Hayu Lee's got the more upside because he's able to hit for more power.
What when we, as a fan, at least I do anyway, like when we talk about minor league baseball, like we think about, like, I'm always looking at prospect ratings and how that changes and comparing teams and stuff like that. But overall, like, the Tiger system had an awesome year, right? In Erie and West Michigan, obviously, like championship type seasons. Do you feel that sometimes can help carry over to the big leagues, like getting that opportunity to play in like a kind of a pennant race at that level?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at when the Tigers 84 team that won, they had between 1972 to 1979, Lakeland, which was a high A affiliate, Double A Montgomery, and their Triple A affiliate Evansville all won championships. And all those guys, Kirk Gibson, Tom Brookins, Jack Morris, Alan Trammell, Lou Whitaker, Kirk Gibson won in Evansville. Jim Leland was the manager of some of those teams. They all played on a championship team. That matters. And that's why they keep these guys together. As much as, I try not to go into cliches about, like, getting stuck in saying, like, chemistry is everything. Well, it is. There are certain things that, if you look at Tampa, for example, Tampa had a bunch of minor league teams that were winning, and that culture carried over in the baseball team. And I think that's going to carry over the Tigers. It does matter to me. You look at that West Michigan team that set all these records, won 93 games. They did it with such dominance. And this is after McGonigal and Clark left. And yeah, were they one of the oldest teams in the Midwest League? Sure, whatever, that's fine. But they still had to beat, and they dominated, though. They absolutely dominated the second half of the season. And I think that does play when these guys come up together, all these experiences. As you guys know, you guys have been coaches. Those experiences bond those guys together, and then knowing that somebody else has got their back, and they're continuing as they go up together. I think that this speaks volumes, and it helps.
Well, you mentioned a lot of the minor league teams, winning championships over the last couple of years, and obviously having the number one farm system. How much fun has it been for you personally? You mentioned you've been doing this for about a decade now. How much fun has it been for you personally these last couple of years covering these guys and covering these teams?
It's been a blast. I mean, if you look at it from a personal point, like from outside of doing this for however you want to describe my role, as a fan, this has been great, because it is, comparatively speaking, when we first started doing this, it was brutal. Trying to talk about the farm system in a positive way, because I've never been, and our staff has this philosophy. We're not going to tell a guy that guy sucks. We're not going to say things like that. We're going to say, oh, well, this guy's, he's not going to be a Major League Baseball player. It's as simple as that. We're going to be honest about it. But a lot of these guys all of a sudden are turning heads, and you're turning the heads of guys like Baseball America and in those things. It's been so much fun to be able to talk about these players and going, they're going to be on Detroit. They're going to be on the Tigers. They're actually going to be there. when you have 7 to 8 guys, not just 2, not just 1, 7 to 8 guys on the roster, including pitchers. I mean, look at 14, 15 guys that are impacting the roster. It's a lot of fun, and be able to talk to guys able to talk to Scott Harris, and the fact that both Chris and I are both part of the Baseball Writers Association. I'm consider myself very lucky and very fortunate, and that's what the fun part is, to be able to be a guy in the room. And then when Tarek School asks you a question about your hat or something like that, it's really cool. I consider myself very lucky and very fortunate, and it's been a lot of fun. And even with the Tigers minor league system struggles, it's still gonna be fun because I love the sport so much. To see these guys get to their big league dream and just remember they saw you in a cold winter day in Erie when it's 40 degrees outside, and they're like giving you a salute. That's the coolest feeling in the world.
Well, we're big fans of yours, man, and we're glad you were interested in joining us to talk Tigers tonight. So we appreciate that, no doubt.
No problem. And like I said, I mean, we're all as a Catholic high school alums, this is really cool to me, honestly. I know that we're rival schools technically, like Greeny and Bishop Foley, but nevertheless, this to me was cool. It's as Catholic Central, DC all gets the love, but hey, these C&D schools, the Division 7, Division 8 schools, they should get some love too.
That's what's up.
Well, before we let you go, Roger, I got to ask you, brought up Tarek Skubal, and we brought up the question to Clay Stone, and it was the last question I left him on. I'm going to ask you the same thing. If you're sitting here right now, if you have to make a prediction, is Tarek Skubal going to be opening day for the Detroit Tigers, or is Harris going to make that difficult decision and trade him away?
I think he's going to be on this roster. I think the Tigers have to be blown away with an option or an offer that they cannot refuse. I think that Tarek Skubal is going to be in Detroit. It would be unless they trade 3 or 4 guys that are going to be starting on the Tigers tomorrow. There's no reason to trade them. The Tigers have all the leverage right now, and they can be as picky as they want to be. I'm hoping that I'm hoping he is on this roster because it makes the team a lot better. But I think he's going to be on this roster. It's been really quiet, and that scares me a little bit. But I don't see outside of the Dodgers and maybe the Mets. I don't see a team prospect-wise that can give what the Tigers want to him. So, I don't see a team that stands out like that.
Do you think there's any chance that he signs an extension? Or I wouldn't imagine it would be this season, but in the offseason, is there any chance that he comes back long term?
He's a Scott Boras client, and that's where the part where it's like, that's the part that gets tricky. As a Scott Boras client, I'll be honest with you, I don't see that. I would like to see the Tigers send him to an extension. I want that to happen, but I think if an extension gets done, it has to get done. To come back to Tiger, unless you get some sort of hometown discount, which Scott Boras is like, no,
not a chance.
Not a chance. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna lie to you guys and go, I'm not. That's not me. And so, but I think he does like me here. Don't get me wrong. All that stuff that makes he was doing that whole tour last week in Detroit. I think that's all legitimate. He loves being here. It's just the problem is that the question is, can the Tigers answer his financial question or pay him what he wants?
Yeah, separate the business aspect from the fan aspect, right? He can like it here, and we can love the guy, but like it's still a business, and he's going to do what's best for him, and Scott Boras is going to do what's best for his client, unfortunately, but that's the way it goes, professional sports. So,
well, with that, Roger, man, really thank you for coming on. This has been a blast. Where can fans find you on social media?
It freeze up. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
freeze up there.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry.
Where can fans find you?
Yeah. Oh, so on Twitter or X, you can follow me at Rajcast Baseball, and then Facebook Tigers Minor League Report, and our website TigersMLReport.com. And if you follow us on or give us a subscribe on YouTube, We post a live show every month during the season. We do a show every Monday and Thursday.
Awesome. Roger, thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to talking to you again down the road, maybe once we get closer to the season.
Absolutely, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks,
Great
man.
job.
Have a great night, man. All right, Brian. It was two really good conversations. Two guys that really know their stuff, man.
Yeah, another great night. Yeah, it was pretty cool to hear some of his insight on some of the lesser known guys, and then back in the day, some of the prospects that we were sold on as fans that were like, who the heck is that guy? Like, compared to now, just night and day. So for all the criticism Scott Harris has gotten for not making moves, whatever, like, massive credit for getting this minor league system to where it is now.
It was one thing Roger brought up is, everybody bashes Chris Ilitch, and I've been on that bandwagon for many years, about not putting money in the team and not making the big moves and this, that, and the other. But you do have to give him a little bit of credit for putting some money in some other areas that maybe didn't grab the headlines. And Roger brought those things up, the technology, the nutrition, which was something that come when some of these guys that came in that the Tigers traded for at the deadline, the myriad of pitchers that they brought in, none of them really worked out for so much, but they brought up the fact that, like, man, like, it's a lot different here than it was when I was at my previous spot, man. The nutrition and everything else, like the facilities, man, they're fantastic. And when I remember when Verlander went to the Astros, and they had an interview with him, and they didn't want to bash the Tigers, but he was pretty adamant about how much better the technology was for him to use in terms of, like, figuring out what pitches were working for him, what pitches weren't. I forget which pitch it was exactly for him that he's like, hey man, just this pitch doesn't work for you. Just get rid of it. Like, don't throw it anymore. And those were things that he just wasn't getting in Detroit that he did get in Houston. And now it feels like where you were hearing things bad about Detroit and people were praising about the spot they were going to, now you're seeing it in reverse, where guys are coming from a spot, coming to Detroit, and they're praising Detroit for their facilities and the other aspects that they're getting.
Well, I agree. And those are things I hope, like, with our future guests that, for all the sports that we cover, we can bring, like, our listeners, like, that in-depth analysis, and information that they normally wouldn't get. And I think about specifically, like, somebody like Chris Fetter, right? Well, for all the compliments that he's gotten for what he's done for Tiger pitchers, and especially Jack Flaherty, right? And okay, well, what specifically is that? Is it in between starts routine? Is it, like you said, the nutrition? Is it the way he stretches? Is it his off-season program? Like, those are cool things that having Roger on to help us talk about that, like, that was super cool, and I hope we can continue to do going forward.
Yeah, because going forward now, especially now that the Lions season is basically over, as I like to say, we turn the page, and we got to start talking some Pistons and some Red Wings. And it's not exactly our wheelhouse generally. I mean, we can talk a little casually about that, but it's not necessarily our wheelhouse like baseball and football is. So that's something where we're definitely going to bring on some guests
for sure,
to pick their brains on to talk about the Pistons and Red Wings, because both those teams have really had phenomenal years up to this point. The Pistons have been incredible, number one team in the East, and the Pistons are the Red Wings, are second in the Eastern Conference themselves. So definitely going to be turning the page a little bit here with the podcast and talking a little bit more hockey and a little bit more basketball here going forward, because we also got Michigan and Michigan State, man, two of the top programs in the country, both top 10 teams. Well, and there is something. I mean, Tom Izzo had some pretty interesting things to say recently too.
You just read my mind. Like, that's
get into.
We talk about college football a lot and how that's different. Well, we can talk about how college basketball is different, right? And Tom Izzo and Michigan State have the number one recruiting class in college basketball next year, and that isn't even at the forefront of, when you think of Tom Izzo and Michigan State, you think of those comments and his frustrations there. And I agree. And we will have spring training to talk about, and we'll still have the NFL draft to talk about, right? Like, we're excited. We got a lot to do, man, in this next couple months.
Absolutely. Well, that was a fun one, Brian. Any final thoughts before we log off here?
No, sir. I think after maybe next week, I'm curious to see, after we talk next week, what's going to happen, like that Black Monday in the NFL. No, we don't think Dan Campbell's getting fired, but I wonder how soon we're going to start hearing about some changes on the Lions coaching staff, and what potentially.
One guy that I meant to bring up with Ben, and I didn't quite get to it. Aaron Glenn with the Jets. What if, because they had a pretty embarrassing loss today. I wouldn't think they would fire him after 1 year, but it's New York, man. It's a different,
Yeah.
it's a different animal.
Yeah.
If he were to get let go, and I'm very interested in your opinion, this, and we can talk about this, and it'll be our last thing before we log off here. If Aaron Glenn were to be let go, do the Lions go and try to bring him back? And would that say about Kevin Shepard? And what did you do with him? Does he take a promotion? Like, does he have to be fired? Like, but yeah, if Aaron Glenn is out there and you're a win now team, like, you got to at least consider going and bringing him back.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, like you said, you never know with the Jets, and like wins and losses aside, like what underlying issues are there in New York that like maybe we don't know about that is happening there that would get him removed, right? And that's a possibility, but I think it would depend on his relationship with Kelvin Shepard, right? And then his relationship with Dan Campbell, right? I mean, if that's all positive and they're all good and on the same page, then I could see something like that happening. But yeah, I mean, but Kelvin Shepard though, he might be a guy that says, okay, like no, I'm a coordinator and I want to be a full-time coordinator, and he might look elsewhere, and that's the nature of the business, right? But hey man, I'm a firm believer that like you do everything you can at that level to get your team in position to win, and if Aaron Glenn makes their team better, then so be it.
And just to stick with that, like again, you brought up Black Monday, and Ben brought it up, and this is something I texted you earlier today, the guy that I wanted, and that's Mike McDaniel from the Dolphins. I feel like he's the perfect fit here. And it's you want a little bit of a change up, you want to get more innovative, you want to get more creative. That's
like,
the guy.
We would have fun breaking down some of their scheme this offseason, like what he's done with the Dolphins, man. That would be fun. That would
going
be
back when he was with the 49ers.
Yes, that would be fun, man. That would be fun.
Absolutely. Well, we can wrap it up with that, Brian. Really fun show tonight. We thank both our guests, Ben Bosscher and Roger Castillo, bringing in some incredible insights. Ben Bosscher, man, I think he's a real rising star in sports media. Man. I think he popped up in my TikTok about maybe a year ago. I'm like, oh man, this guy is really good. Like, I would not be surprised to be seeing him climb the ranks here very soon. And then Roger's been just phenomenal. Like you said, he's been covering minor leagues and the Tigers for the last decade. Just phenomenal. Somebody I personally have looked up to a long time. I've known him for a while. It has always been super awesome to me. So awesome to finally kind of have him on and really talk on this podcast. So really, really fun night tonight. And we appreciate all you guys for listening and watching. And for Brian Barnes, I'm Dan Murphy, and we'll see you again next week.